speciale taken. Als het misgaat, moet je vanaf deze plaats in. Dat is de... Ja, goed zo.
Krijg jij ook een knoet, of niet?
Ja, zeker. In accordance with the customs of this university, I open the ceremony with the words Spiritus Sancti Gratia Illuminet Sensus et Corda Nostra. Please take your seat. Ik begin maar in het Nederlands, zometeen alles in het Engels. Ik heet u allen van harte welkom in de aula van de Radboud Universiteit bij gelegenheid van het afscheidscollege van professor Huib Ernste. Mijn naam is Paul Hendricks, ik ben oud-decaan van de faculteit der managementwetenschappen. Als ik goed gekeken heb, dan ben ik een van de 2 oud-decanen. Ik heb Rob van der Heijden nog gezien, maar verdere andere oud-decanen heb ik nog niet gespot. Misschien dat alle turmoil van de laatste tijd daar debet aan is. Het is gebruikelijk dat een afscheidscollege voorafgegaan wordt door een enkel woord over de afscheidnemende hoogleraar. En dat doe ik graag, dat woord uitspreken. Huib Ernste heeft sociale en economische geografie gestudeerd aan de Rijksuniversiteit Groningen, waar hij in 1983 is afgestudeerd. Van 1980 tot 1997 was Huib werkzaam als student, docent en onderzoeker in Zwitserland. Hij is daar in 1987 gepromoveerd aan de ETH Zurich. En daarna was hij als universitair hoofddocent verbonden aan die instelling en als gastonderzoeker werkzaam in verschillende universiteiten in Europa en de VS. Huib is in 1998 naar Nijmegen gekomen om hoofd te worden van de leerstoelgroep Sociale Geografie van de faculteit der Managementwetenschappen. En sinds 2001 is hij daar aangesteld als hoogleraar Sociale Geografie. En wie het cv van Huib bestudeert, valt zijn zeer brede en veelzijdige belangstelling op, zoals het een waar geograaf betaamt, en ook de academische diepgang die zijn werk tekent, zoals het een waar geograaf betaamt. En ook het symposium van vandaag was daar weer een getuigenis van. Voor verdere nadere details verwijs ik u graag naar de website ernste.nl, alwaar u ook zijn vakantiewoning in Wallis kunt boeken. Ik wil toch nog heel kort noemen dat Nijmegen sinds 1958 een opleiding sociale geografie heeft. Vele illustere alumni opgeleverd, ik ga ze niet allemaal noemen. Professor Kools was de eerste hoogleraar sociale geografie hier. De geschiedenis van geografie is er één van ups en downs. Maar ik kan met recht zeggen dat de periode Ernste, de periode sinds eind jaren 90, een van die ups is. Om maar één voorbeeld te geven, aan de Radboud Universiteit is een van de problemen die wij ervaren, dat de instroom in de masteropleidingen veel lager ligt dan de uitstroom uit de bacheloropleidingen. En de masteropleiding Human Geography is daar een notoire uitzondering op. En dat is in hoge mate te danken aan de persoon die ik nu graag het woord geef om zijn afscheidscollege te geven. The floor is yours.
Okay, Mr. Rector, esteemed colleagues, friends, family, and distinguished listeners. Working as a professor at university is something you do with heart and soul. This makes it immediately clear how this valedictory address ties in with the theme of the small symposium the department offered to me prior to this valedictory address, which was mainly about the role that feelings, emotions and affect play in our relationship with the world in general, and with those specific places in particular we feel closely connected with and in which we unfold our activities. The quality of places is mainly characterized by how we feel there. If we want to improve the quality of these places, it implies that we must, above all, improve the way we experience these places. This is also the central task of what we call placemaking. Better places not only feel better, but also let us function better and give us a direction on how we can best care about these places, so that those places become more sustainable and equitable. The university, of course, is a special place from which we make a special contribution, an academic contribution to the world near and far around us. So to be able to improve such a place, we should make it feel good for researchers and lecturers, as well as for students. We need to be involved in it with heart and soul, both in good times and in bad times. That is why I would like to take a moment to reflect on the particularities of the place we call university. What is a university and what is it for? The idea of the modern university was coined by Wilhelm von Humboldt, the brother of the equally famous geographer Alexander von Humboldt. Both were liberal-minded followers of Enlightenment, who each in their own way worked for a better, more humane and sustainable and just world. King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia appointed William von Humboldt to initiate the reform of the Prussian educational system and the foundation of what is now known to be the Humboldt University of Berlin, according to these new enlightened ideas. The success of this reform attracted many new students from all over Europe and beyond. And in tandem with the growing power of Prussia, fostered by this new educational system and the new orientation in university research, gave this educational model an almost paradigmatic status and carried it all over the world in the vein of globalization. Wilhelm von Humboldt did not invent the new educational system and the modern research university from scratch, but built his ideas on the shoulders of many other giants, such as Herder, Fichte, Steffens, Goethe, Schiller, Pestalozzi, Kant, and Schleiermacher. He elegantly synthesized these ideas and institutionalized and implemented them in the new educational system. Humboldt's model for education has become famous as the German educational ideal. But this translation of the German term Bildungsideal does not do justice to what it actually meant. One of the key elements of this ideal is the close relationship between research and teaching. Because of this close relationship, the better translation would have been the German ideal for knowledge production. Wilhelm von Humboldt combined the humanism, enlightenment, and idealism of his times. It was inspired by the Greek paideia as an early example of the comprehensive development of human spiritual, aesthetic, and physical abilities, which with the aim of molding scholars into complete and harmonious citizens. A model which is currently propagated again by Professor Jan Bransen, head of the Teaching and Learning Center of our university, in his attempt to get rid of the control and test fetishism, which to a large degree still dominates our Dutch educational system. Humboldt's model is more than just a pedagogical ideal. His main achievement was the elaboration of a concrete plan for its operationalization and institutionalization, and that he managed to convince the Prussian king to implement it. It is difficult to pinpoint in more detail the exact design principles he used, because his plans in writing remained unfinished. But nevertheless, I will give it a try. First, the research orientation. Knowledge, according to Humboldt's model, should be gained by free, unrestricted, individual, subjective discovery, leading to new insights. Knowledge is not gained by learning by hard supposed facts, but only through real new insights, based on passionate curiosity, and the feeling and experience of having discovered something new, even if these new insights also pose new questions and provoke new doubts. Curricula are thus not supposed to be restricted to already given and already applied knowledge, but should be geared towards finding new truths, new empirical facts, as well as new moral and aesthetic truths. The backbone of the university curriculum and research program is the joint individual and collective research process. The exploratory, open-minded way in which we all together try to deal with the world around us. This does not only generate new knowledge, but also contributes to the general and holistic formation of the personality of both research scholars as well as students. And that, in turn, helps us to become active and engaged citizens, through which we contribute to society in general and to the solution of specific problems in particular. So even when students do not become professional researchers in their later careers, they are prepared to become personalities continuously driven by curiosity to critically search for new and better insights and perspectives. Scientific knowledge is by definition an open-ended phenomenon, implying that all types of one-sidedness must be opposed in favor of a truly holistic truth and knowledge. One can, for the moment, intersubjectively agree upon. Science is therefore inherently critical and oriented towards improving our knowledge. One can imagine how this principle unleashed and facilitated the immense scientific progress we have experienced since modernity, even if the term progress itself is also always contested. It is this contestation which is the essence of progress, change, and transformation. The holistic perspective also implies another structural aspect of the new research university, namely that within the university, ideally, all kinds of knowledge or disciplines should be integrated, or otherwise be made mutually accessible, and should enable interaction on a level playing field for the sake of the joint course. So the traditional medieval hierarchy of faculties should, according to Wilhelm von Humboldt's new ideas, rather be leveled out. Later on, in the course of further specialization and deepening division of labor, new faculties and disciplines emerged. And within the disciplines, a multiplicity of specialized perspectives or streams of thought have developed. This sometimes makes us forget that the Humboldtian concept of knowledge production implies that these faculties, disciplines, and streams of thought should be in constant dialogue with each other. The modern research universities, as Humboldt envisioned them, are supposed to be places where one is stimulated to look beyond one's plate. On all levels, Universities should be the hub of ceaseless self-questioning and creative skepticism. The university is thus the institution that gives shape to the notion of the unity of reason, of reasoning, and of debate. Even though the paths to real, freely gained and true knowledge are manifold, they are all oriented towards a totality that unites them, all in the same endeavor of searching for truth in plural. These principles also imply that universities and knowledge production should not be led by anything else than reason, not by politics, ideologies, economic interests, or bureaucratic directives. The university should be autonomous. She should set her own rules and regulations and procedures based on reason. Wilhelm von Humboldt was seeking to set up universities with their own estates as a source of income, enhanced by government funding, guaranteeing them economic independence. Even though he could not fully realize this in the case of the prototypical University of Berlin. This principle of economic autonomy is nevertheless embraced as an essential element of academic freedom. Another aspect of academic freedom is that researchers and lecturers should have the freedom to focus on whatever topic they believe to be relevant to the development of new scientific insights. The same freedom of choice should be allowed to students. They should be able to choose their own topic of interest and by whom they want to be taught about these topics. So also in this respect, the freedom of the mind in following their curiosity and their own line of thought is seeking new insights was held in high regard. For students, this implies freedom of to choose their educational program and to choose their own specialization and elective courses, both within and beyond their own discipline. For professors and lecturers, this implies that their own research specialization should be allowed a place in the curriculum, or that they should be entitled to lecture on the topic of their choice, sometimes also designated as venia legendi. These core aspects of academic freedom are sometimes coined as the general principle under which all the other aspects of the Humboldtian ideal for knowledge production can be subsumed, which also makes the principle of academic freedom the most acclaimed and most contested element of the educational ideal. This academic freedom, however, does not stand alone, but is directly related to a strong responsibility to apply the new gained knowledge and skills for the better of society, and as a moral duty for the sake of humanity. Therefore, the unfolding self-cultivation of the individual human values, abilities, talents, and creativity as a main objective of the Humboldtian ideal is closely entangled with the idea of the unfolding of the same potential for all, for society as a whole, and for the world in general, directed towards values such as the inviolability of human life, individual freedom and integrity, and the equal value of all people, irrespective of race, gender, or other traits. Solidarity with the weak and vulnerable, justice, tolerance, and responsibility. And this makes the openness of knowledge production inherently political and never neutral. Scientists should therefore always be critically engaged, and this is the essence of any critical approach within science. In an open democratic society, the university is thus also the intellectual, moral conscience of society. Or as Jean-Pierre Wils in 2012 of the Radboud University once said, in a functioning democracy, society is entitled to having independent institutions of reflexivity, guaranteed by the public hand, such as universities. Universities are hubs of resistance to the populist simplifications and guardians of social debate and the public culture of civil society. When they lose that function, they are no longer universities. Universities are therefore also seen as the fourth, or if we include media, as the fifth basic institution, power and pillar in society, next to the trias politica, protecting society against a lack of knowledge and short-sightedness, employing well-reflected and evidence-based knowledge and a long-term vision. Not so long ago, also the National Advisory Board for Public Administration came to a similar advice. Recently, it was even suggested to include the role of universities and their academic freedom in the Dutch constitution. This, by the way, comes pretty close to the main aim of a unique Dutch institution called the Netherlands Scientific Council for Government Policy, WRR, but is tellingly seldomly found as the main aim of current research universities in the Netherlands. Progressive increase in freedom and responsibility. Such a full-fledged academic attitude is not something we are born with, or which falls from heaven. To become an articulate, self-conscious learner, one first needs to be equipped with the necessary tools and basic knowledge, designated as propedeutic knowledge and skills. This defines the didactical difference between the way these propedeutic knowledge and skills are taught and how more academic knowledge and skills are taught. The latter is less the form of instruction, but more a form of coaching and Socratic learning. Humboldt, for example, states that the university professor, therefore, is not comparable with a high school instructor. And the student is no longer someone merely passively consuming knowledge, but a person who undertakes own research, while the professor coaches and supports them in doing so, showing them how to learn and how to become intellectually independent. At university, they all should be free members of a community devoted to curiosity-driven learning. Some of these principles can still be found in the statutes of some universities, or even in most universities, or in the laws on higher education, but often in different degrees of detail and with varying operational implications. Over the years, they also have been changed and updated under the influence of other rationales and changing situations. Irrespective of these developments, the full-fledged Humboldtian humanistic university ideal is alive and kicking, and as topical as ever. As former Minister of Education of Bavaria and philosopher Nida Rümelin convincingly shows. And as our current rector, Magnificus José Sanders of the Radboud University in her acceptance speech at her inauguration clearly stressed. But these Humboldtian principles are not carved in stone. For example, under the current endeavor to decolonize the university, one should also have an eye for alternatives. In this respect, the South African Ubuntu philosophy may serve as an alternative basis for knowledge production. But sometimes, like also in this case, ideas from different origins end up with the same principles. The similarities are stunning, but also understandable, as we are addressing the same universal human values. These ideas are also once more confirmed and encrypted in the European Magna Carta Universitatum of 2020. And in the 2023, Steve Muller convincingly argued that there is even a second coming of von Humboldt's idea. But even if that ideal is still upheld, it does not mean that reality cannot substantively deviate from this ideal. On the operational level, many aspects have gone lost. The ideal is constantly under threat, and it calls for continuous critical reflection to ensure that our university model for knowledge production is still future-proof. Universities have operationalized this general model of the ideal research university in different ways under different circumstances, and have attempted to find workable compromises on each of these principles. Stefan Collini, in 2012, gives a nuanced overview of the kinds of dilemmas and compromises. Similarly, although the Dutch universities and Dutch state with the Higher Education Act are not the most prominent advocates of this Humboldtian university model, they nevertheless claim several of these basic principles of this model. It is understandable that financial independence and autonomy, as well as academic freedom, can never be achieved for 100%. After all, trees do not grow to the sky. But this, of course, applies equally to the other fundamental independent powers in our society, like in the trias politica. Precisely today, in populist times, we recognize how much these fundamental constitutional structures and crucial bodies are under pressure and in dire need of protection, and sometimes even need direct resistance against these threats. For good reasons, therefore, those constitutional principles had to be extensively negotiated in the government formation process last January. These are fundamental threats, not only to universities, but to our society as a whole. Here lies an important task for the university leadership and for the Association of Dutch Universities. These are not private and particular interests of an ordinary organization. No, these are general societal interests which need protection. I remember, for instance, that in January 2011, under the rather modest motto of "Give us the space to enable the future," we, together with more than 1,000 professors and more than 11,000 students from all Dutch universities, jointly protested against the cuts in higher education. Despite this action, and despite a booming economy, for many years there have been very hefty budget cuts on higher education and scientific research and on student scholarships. These seriously threaten universities and the role they should play in our society. So this justifies a much firmer and less modest resistance and emphasis on what universities stand for by the joint Dutch universities. Although there would be every reason to lament about these general basic conditions for universities, I do not want to do that here on this occasion, but rather provide a glimpse on how we, as the geography department, have been trying to apply these basic principles of a humanistic university and its societal role from the inside out. Instead of bashing the university from outside, because that's not my style, I prefer academic placemaking from the inside. by creating an effective academic atmosphere, or as the students would say, an academic vibe, for good teaching and good research. As recently, a member of our geography group noted, this goes beyond the usual immunizing lip services to these principles by universities, and beyond the highbrow slogans we know from university PR messages. Our geography academic placemaking is a serious attempt, which in many cases has been very successful and in some cases still need more effort. Also, that is a continuous learning process. First, the research orientation. Our curiosity-driven research, attempting to understand the whole world around us, our geographical research is never finished. Truths of today are the untruth of tomorrow. What is true here is not true there. What we might be convinced of is not necessarily also the opinion of others. Knowledge is created through continuous deliberation. Among scientists and students. We therefore focus on investigative teachers and teaching researchers. We have banished the mass production trimmed instructor who exclusively teaches like a machine but without new ideas. Mass production might be efficient but is not academic. Students need to be involved in a joint research process. Like the lectures, they need to search themselves, who they are, what they stand for, and what knowledge and skills they think they need. They need to develop their own knowledge and insights. And yes, in geography, this kind of thinking and research takes time. The real fieldwork research, not just on our doorstep, but especially also further afield, immersing us in a foreign environment where we literally feel the differences and learn to understand and deal with the unknown, or deal with just that other side of the story. This research orientation cannot be pressure cooked. Even if university administrators would prefer that. Notwithstanding the fantastic slogans of our university, they often contradict themselves when they push us to the extreme, to make sure students study as fast as possible, and scholars to produce as many publications as possible. Deliberately against this grain, we pride ourselves on the fact that students sometimes take longer, for good reasons, and that we follow the route of slow but high-quality science. Their and our civil disobedience assures some of the Humboldtian principles. And by the way, we really do guide them in their research process in the smartest possible way to secure their progress. For this purpose, we adopted the Oxford tutorial model. Yes, there is another one of those aspects suggested by the Humboldtian model. That other form of didactics based on self-development and social learning, tutoring instead of instructing. These students and scholars are not idle, but in a healthy way have doubts, think and explore by trial and error and through discussion, through which they and we gain phronetic wisdom in a self-directed way. As a result of the pressure cooker model and disrespectful opinion that social sciences and humanities are only leftist hobbies, we in the Netherlands, and only in the Netherlands, are stuck with the one-year master programs in these fields. But now, finally, after many years, our civil disobedience in the field of geography is justified. And a new lobby from Dutch universities for more equally, gelijkwaardigheid, between disciplines was initiated. However, one may be much more explicit and outspoken about these new efforts. This brings me to a much more explicit and aspect of the Humboldtian model, multi-perspectivity. Knowledge is never finished and is also constantly facing new challenges to which we must respond. So we cannot definitely pin down a disciplinary canon, but must be agile and open. When we introduced the bachelor-master structure in geography, in most disciplines, this was not a significant departure from the past. They still relied on old disciplinary structures and content. We, as geographers, in contrast, decided to focus on urgent societal challenges and designed our masters accordingly. And the current complex societal problems cannot be addressed only from one disciplinary perspective. Disciplinary borders are probably the least helpful if we want to help solve these problems. Of course, there is still such a thing as a geographical view, but that is only one among many others. So here the Humboldtian aspect of multi-perspectivity or multidisciplinarity is leading. There are many different perspectives and schools of thought, with each their own view on things. We have included this in our curriculum, using exemplary hermeneutical approach, combining scope and focus. Students from other disciplines who want to join us in the masters, to jointly learn to understand these complex social problems, are welcome to join. And do not have to be brainwashed into geographers in a pre-master first. No, the challenge of multidisciplinary collaboration became an integral part of our program. The other way around, we also invite our students to search beyond their own discipline for whatever is needed and is relevant to understand the problems at stake. For example, in the form of elective courses. But also, we welcomed the cooperation with other disciplines. For example, the cooperation between political geography and conflict studies in a joint master specialization. This was new terrain. In such an enormous broad field of study as ours, we maintain that we cannot do everything ourselves and therefore followed a global sourcing strategy in which we actively search for cooperation with other programs, enabling us to reciprocally make use of each other's specialisms. A typical form of co-opetition. Our university, meanwhile, so stiffened on their own location and their own location only, did not know what hit them when we started to profile geography, like many modern companies do, as an inter-university network organization. Nevertheless, this is how we have set up successful long-term collaborations with the University of Amsterdam, University of Groningen and the University of Wageningen. We are all very grateful to our colleagues from those universities, some of them whom are present here. We also extend this global sourcing strategy to international partners, for example, in the framework of World in Classrooms, etc. All other strategies only lead to short-sighted provincialization of science. The current discussion in the Netherlands about returning to Dutch as a predominant language of instruction therefore seems an anachronism and carries the populist traits of the Netherlands first kind, where science will always be universal and will need a lingua franca. This was Latin in the past, and now it's English. Yes, indeed, we train our students to become truly cosmopolitan world citizens who look beyond the obvious and beyond the local. Collaboration and multidisciplinary broadening of our horizons is therefore very logical and a must from a geographical point of view. Yet, there is constant university and faculty pressure to limit these possibilities. University managers do not like those frayed edges of disciplines and often still prefer the neatly tidy disciplinary containers of yesteryear. But with that, we won't win the war and we won't save the world. It is also a bit of a contradiction, since in fact our faculty has strategically chosen for multidisciplinarity. But indeed, saying and doing and developing an operative vision of how to do so are two pairs of shoes. For students, lecturers, and scholars, this broadening of perspective is a challenge, but also an enrichment and an eye-opener. Anyway, we want to create the effective atmosphere in which students and researchers feel they can make a difference. Not regurgitating old knowledge, but discovering and exploring new areas and developments and new ways to solve problems. Easy? No, it's not easy. But we are not for easy things at university, are we? By the way, also for us lecturers and scholars, this is sometimes to be learned. We sometimes have our hobby horses, which we keep repeating prayerfully, and we sometimes close our eyes to precisely that other way of looking at things. And the penny does not always drop immediately with students either. It remains the work of people, and it remains, as they would say, in the field of research on affective atmospheres, an embodied practice, in which the quality of social interactions and that of academic meeting plays a central role. And that brings me to that specific place of academic freedom, where we practice and exercise freedom of thinking, like, for example, in the initiative of our geographical colleagues at the Teachers Academy on learning to think with geography. Real creative thinking and innovation demands a special place. This, for example, is such a place. This is the incubator space, the garage, in which the now multi-billion-dollar company Hewlett-Packard started, now providing almost all the computer infrastructure at our university. But one could also give other examples, ranging from Google, Amazon, to Microsoft and others. Why these special places? These are places where independence, autonomy, and academic freedom can be lived. That academic freedom that is so crucial at universities. So those universities which value and support this kind of innovativeness like for example, the Ivy League Stanford University in California, celebrate this concept and have even institutionalized it on a large scale in their teaching, showing that this is indeed possible. This is one of their examples. Until recently, the Educational Design and Technology Department at Radboud University also identified itself with such a free, creative, garage-like space, with the accompanying affective atmosphere, which sparked their joy of being creative, until they were forcibly restrained in a corset by the new management of the Radboud Teaching and Learning Center, TLC. The creative atmosphere went down the drain, and some of the most talented and creative members left. Not very surprising. In the Netherlands, the large universities increasingly organized themselves as mass production knowledge factories, while forgetting that the product and service they sell requires something totally different: free spaces. The best and most innovative products and initiatives, almost by definition, never fit into existing old structures. And that's why the facilitation of these diverse, free spaces on a large scale is so needed. Indeed, instead of using support personnel to help suppress the creative potentials of scientists and students, the support personnel should be used to help create these free spaces for these unusual initiatives on a large scale, within the frameworks of what is possible. That would be real support. We have not been successful at every front in creating a Humboldtian university from the inside yet. But we have strived for many years to create such a concrete, free place at our department, where we can spontaneously meet, deliberate, and get inspired and be criticized by each other. A place where there is a maximum opportunity for serendipity, a creative incubator. Not a standard meeting room where you only go if you have a formal meeting agenda. No, our garage, furnished by the thrift store with a number of quality newspapers such as Die Zeit, Le Monde Diplomatique, and the Groene Amsterdammer, or the Times Literary Supplement, right there where the coffee machine, copier, and pigeonholes are located. In relational theory, this would be called an obligatory passage point. Not the safe place of one's own bubble, but a place of unexpected encounters, out of which new ideas and initiatives may emerge. A deliberately unsafe place, in the good sense of the word. We called it our theory lab, a place with the affective atmosphere of a creative place. This initiative for such an incubator hub has always met quite a bit of resistance from the university, even though one might say that this should be the quintessence of the university. Currently, this idea of experimental places is very common and popular in society. We have living labs, urban labs, transformation labs, integration labs, etc., etc. But the lab atmosphere seems to be on the retreat at our university. Even though I'm confident that the geographers will keep up their creative departmental placemaking. This joy of being creative is also part of our teaching. Here are some students who creatively developed an example of how certain places affect us and how they affect those places. Finally, the other side of the academic freedom is the outreach to and responsibility for society. and a critical approach to the pressing societal problems we are faced with. This is, for example, done in the framework of research internships, in which students need to immerse themselves in real-life practical problems and engage employing their academic research to help to solve these problems. But also our scholarly research is geared to that purpose, helping to create a better place, better public urban place spaces, helping to optimize the integration of migrants and refugees, helping to solve the problems of over-tourism, creating a more just distribution of economic opportunities, designing more bottom-up procedures to making society more sustainable, and helping overcome violent conflicts. Looking for new inclusive participatory methods for policy making, giving voice to those either to unheard, decolonize society, etc., etc. Not just theoretically, but also practically. Just two small examples. First, the way we allowed refugee academics to take part in our courses and in our research, in the framework of what we called the Asylum University, a PhD project of one of our members of the department. Something one would, according to the Humboldtian principles of open academia, expect to be self-evident, but which showed not to be so self-evident at our university after all. Second, an extraordinary seminar series organized on the occasion of the current war raging in Gaza, in which many different aspects and positions of what is going on are critically reflected and scientifically enlightened. These moral engagements are, of course, closely related to how we are also emotionally moved by our current situation, and how scientific cognition is also determined by our affects. Furthermore, through participation in public debates, and by means of our professor by special appointment, Professor Gert-Jan Hospes, we carry our scientific ideas into the world and keep in touch with what is going on out there. These are core issues in our academic citizenship, in what is called transformative learning. I could go on much longer, but the drinks are waiting. As a one-sentence conclusion, this is, all in all, how we as geographers are engaging in academic placemaking from the inside. Even if some university administrators might not have liked it, we had to do it, to enact the Humboldtian purpose of academia. In my inaugural speech, almost 25 years ago, I asked, through the words of Archimedes, to give us a place to stand so that we can move the world. We, from our side, at least have tried our best to move the university with heart and soul. I hope that the university and faculty management may once acknowledge these efforts and achievements, and I hope that they will follow the example and will turn this university into a real university in the Humboldtian sense again. Having said that, at the end of this address, I would like to express my thanks to many of the close colleagues within and outside the department for their trust and good cooperation. That was quite a challenge at times, especially because our ambitions were high and everyone had to pull the same strings. Sometimes we also needed to be liable for possible improvements and to be successful all together. Together we did our best in a not always easy context to make this place a better place through academic placemaking, while also making the world around us a tiny bit better as well. In that respect, in these last words of gratitude, I sincerely include all of you. But I do want to mention Joris Gapendonk specifically for what he has meant for me and the geography department in the last period of my official academic career. Dear friends and family, I love you and you have meant a lot for how I have felt in place, enabling me to contribute to our academic placemaking. And now I make place for my successor and will continue to research whatever in peace. So let us move to the drinks and catch up together.